welcome to your Daily Game Face. I'm Dr. Kim Lannon, and I'm here with Lou Blasi. It's hotter than Hades in the studio this morning.
Oh, it gets worse. It gets much worse. But it's just, in the studio, it's just the transition times. In other words, in the summer it'll be cool, in the winter it's warm, but in fall and spring it's like all over the map.
Well, it's like a sauna in here.
Yeah.
It's 80 degrees outside right now. It feels like it's 100.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful day. Lou and I were just having a conversation about the fact that I chose not to wear a skirt today because I was too lazy to
Drag me into that conversation.
shave my legs this morning. Not that everyone needs to know that, but
I was sucked into that conversation. I wasn't having the conversation with you.
You were sucked into the conversation. Well, it's hot in here, and that's why the conversation came up, because I was like, oh, I should have worn a skirt. Whew. Anyway.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And it's a lovely day here in Massachusetts for people that are still in cold weather. We are nice and warm here this week. And it's beautiful. It makes vitamin D production fabulous, and mental health issues hopefully clear for people that are seasonally affective in their disordered depressions and anxieties. So how was your week?
Not bad. Last night was great. First outdoor night here in New England.
Oh, yeah.
Get to sit outside. And,
it was beautiful.
Yeah, no bugs.
Well,
no greenheads.
4 seconds.
Yeah.
Because where you live, they're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming. And people have been reporting the little cicadas are starting to pop up everywhere.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes, that will be fun. And I actually saw someone make cookies with them. And I was like, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Cicada cookies?
Yes. Yesterday on Facebook, someone had posted cicada cookies. And I'm like, oh, that just killed that for me. Yeah,
God, no.
I don't think you're supposed to do that.
No.
So, anyway. Hey, only on Facebook, right? The Facebook.
The Facebook,
The Facebook. Or the Instagram.
Hey, my phrase for the week is, hey, people have different paths. If you want to eat cicada cookies, as long as I don't have to,
we're all good.
Watch you or see them or be in the same room with them, I'm all fine.
See, the big thing when I was a kid was that we did chocolate-covered grasshoppers and chocolate-covered ants.
No, you did not.
I did.
Oh.
And I would never do that again. That was a thing.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Like repeatedly, or just at one point you decided we're going to try this out?
Well, that it was given to me.
Yeah.
Like it was like my grandmother would also cook, fiddleheads and dandelion greens, which I like. But at the same time, it was like, and chocolate covered ants and
fiddleheads are good.
Yeah, I love fiddleheads and dandelion greens are fantastic, and they're a great source of vitamins and all that kind of stuff.
When I was a kid, I played with grasshoppers. I wouldn't want to kill them and put them in chocolate and eat them.
I didn't kill them. They were already deceased and given to me, which I would never do now.
Right.
I mean, I was a kid, so you can't blame me.
Were they gathered grasshoppers, or were they store-bought grasshoppers? Or?
I believe that they were store-bought with chocolate dip.
Oh, really? So they're already prepared?
They were they were pre-prepared. Yes. So anyway, gross. Just gross.
Yep.
Period. I could never do the Bear Grylls thing or the naked and afraid and.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Ooh.
The most surprising thing to you that you've ever eaten?
The most surprising thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
I had alligator sausage once.
Oh, probably the most surprising thing, and I didn't realize I was eating it, and I would never do this again because I'm against it. But when I was in Australia.
Oh no.
see, I just had to say I was in Australia.
Oh no.
And and they eat everything, and they were serving wallaby and kangaroo, and I was like, oh, what's this? And they were like, what? I'm like, oh no. I was like, because those are cute little creatures.
Yeah,
you can't do that. So.
Funny, kangaroos came up the other day because I was talking about my deer killing tally.
Oh my God, this is terrible.
Well, no, not purposely.
Oh,
killed with vehicles. I've killed 3 deer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, in the course of my career.
Well, that's a record.
Yeah. Well, the last one, as I describe this all the time, I had some experience hitting deer. And a deer crossed the road in front of me, and I missed it. And I said to myself, there's always two. There's always two. There's always two. So I'm scanning, and I saw another one across the road on the left side. And I said, okay. And I killed the third one.
Oh, my God, Lou.
I was too busy looking for the second one and killed the third one.
Okay.
No, come on, it happens. It's New England.
Your daily game face just took a terrible turn for the floor.
know the first question the cop asked me when he got there?
Were you drunk?
No, well, I'm sure he was assessing that at the time, but because the woman behind me lost her mind.
I'm sure.
And called the cops. She was out of her mind about it. And comes up to me, and I had the Jeep. I had a Wrangler.
Yeah.
And the
Oh.
Jeep looked like it hadn't been scratched. It was like nothing. And the cop looks at me and he goes, "Do you want it?" I said,
Oh my God, are you serious?
"Yeah." I said, "No, I don't want it." He goes,
Oh.
"All right, we'll take it to a homeless shelter," because I guess that's what they do.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I've only been hit by a deer once, and I believe it lived, and it's very devastating.
Oh, to be
Being
honest,
the
yeah,
animal
one
lover
of them
that
hit
I-
me. Yeah,
Yes.
I hit two. One of them hit me.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
driving along, and it ran.
Yep.
It literally ran into me.
Yeah, you get no chance. You get
Yeah.
no chance.
And I did
But-
see it coming, and then it bounced off. Yeah.
When I told that story, I think it was on Sirius this weekend, someone told me that in Australia,
Yes.
the equivalent is kangaroo.
Yeah. Oh, they're everywhere.
Like people are running down kangaroos left and right.
Well, because so given that I've been to Australia, I can attest to the fact that, so you know how deer are kind of, you can see them, they're sporadic here, they're
Yeah.
not as, at least, well, in the past year, they're a little
So
bit
there's more deer are more prevalent there than deer are. I mean,
Well,
kangaroos are more prevalent there than deer are
in
here.
my experience
Yeah.
of being there when it was, for an extended period of time, you did not go a day without seeing, I don't know, pods or big gathering, I don't know what they're, big groups of them along the road and hopping along and
Really,
they were everywhere.
having a smoke.
And
yeah.
which is why they explained to me, coming back to the story of eating them, was why they were good with, harvesting them because they're
Sure.
plentiful.
Thinning the herd.
Yeah, but I don't do that. So, and they eat a lot of different interesting things. The only other place that I've been to where I've been I haven't, in Asia, I wouldn't eat
Oh.
90% of the stuff that,
Yeah.
But in Iceland, one of my favorite places to ever travel to, if you ever get a chance to go there, I highly recommend it. I go there time and again for one, the Aurora Borealis is
Yeah.
amazing. And then they have the Blue Lagoon and all the hot springs and all these beautiful places. But they still do whaling there. And I'm out on killing whales.
Yep.
And they also have horse as a delicacy. And I'm not doing that because
Oh.
I love horses.
That's tough.
So-
Yeah.
So your Daily Game Face is now talking about saving animals today.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you walk along to all the little restaurants, they have the little, little billboards out, and
Yep.
Medallion of horse and whatever. But it's not like some of them they cage it in a different word, and I was like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's the wild horse stallion. Blah. Oh no. I'm like, no. We do not kill horses.
No.
I'm all set. Or whales.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually
I'm
taste that, and I'm good. I stuck with salmon.
I might have tried the kangaroo though. If I'm in Australia and I'm in a restaurant and it's on the menu, I might try it.
Yeah, I did, but
Yeah.
then things that have a face that are cute, I can't do that.
No, I understand.
That's why I don't eat rabbit.
Oh well, I'm Italian. I have done it, but
Well,
not
I've
since
done
I
it,
was a
but I
kid.
don't.
Yeah.
Right. So especially when people just give you and say, "Here
I don't
you
like
go."
it. I don't like any food that looks like the original animal.
Yeah, that's why I don't eat whole fish.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay,
Yeah.
so moving along.
Just my mind's going back to a couple bad incidents in that regard.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm going to now be vegetarian.
Yep.
So yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good for you.
So what?
Okay. So this, I didn't want to let the whole month go by, even though we're only midway through, is that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. Did you know that?
I think we've mentioned that. Haven't we mentioned that? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if I haven't, and we're in the middle of the month and smack in the middle of it and coming into summer, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what better time to be talking about mental health and awareness, because people are sort of losing their minds, because people are having a little bit of meltdown about the unmasking, the masking, the, oh my God, we're going back to work. Oh my God, people are going to be near me and they're vaccinated.
Yep.
They're not vaccinated.
One last hissy fit before.
And the anxiety that has, and the mask shaming that has come up in the past week as a result of the no mask, yes, no, don't wear it, yes.
Yep.
So, not making any light of it, but people, now here it is, Awareness Month for just regular, everyday, timely anxiety, depression, bipolar, OCD, people that have all kinds of, long-term addiction issues,
Right.
like all these things. And now we add in like this acute panic of people,
People are panicking?
Oh.
Yeah.
you know what I do for a living, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some panic because some people are very worried. So for instance, I think this has good ground. There's a lot of people that work in hospitals that I work with, clearly, because I'm a doctor.
Sure.
So there's more, at least anecdotally, there's been more people talking to me in the past week about, from hospital workers, that we can't go unmasked because there's so many compromised patients immunity-wise, and also there's still COVID going on within that confine.
Absolutely.
So the hospital staff, doctors, nurses, social workers, everyone that like I see and that I'm friends with and so on, there's a little bit of a panic because, they don't want the hospital. So there's one hospital I know for someone that's working and that's lowering the mask mandate. And so now there's a lot of fight back with the nurses and the doctors saying, no, because...
But everyone has the option to wear a mask. No one's saying you can't wear a mask.
Right, but but the thing is, when you say you don't have to wear it if you're vaccinated, then it's on the honor system. Now you've got people who aren't honorable, who will not, they're anti-vax,
right,
which is fine if they want to be that way, but then they're not considering the other people that would like them to. So I know that there's been lots of talk about, and I just keep telling all my clients and colleagues that it will work itself out because a lot of companies and hospitals and restaurants, and they're going to choose that, no shirt, no service, no pants, no service, no shoes, no service, no mask, no service.
Right.
So it's kind of going to follow that line, and I can already see that happening. So I've just, instead of being like, no colluding with anybody, but just jumping on the bandwagon of, I think that most places will stay in line with the panic of people's, because they don't want to lose business for one way or the other, but...
Well, that's not... Businesses have a right to make a decision.
Right.
That's not panic. And a restaurant gets a positive case, they're shut down
well, that's
for
the
a few
thing.
days.
And
they can't afford it.
And, well, that's the thing is, so if you... so many conversations about this. So if all the masking goes away... or they say you don't have to wear a mask here, and someone gets COVID in the restaurant, a restaurant worker, and the whole place has to shut down for 2 weeks and the whole thing, well, there goes the revenue. So what is it? I have a client that owns a restaurant, and I said, if you have that happen, then what? And they hadn't thought of that. They're like, oh, no mask, this is awesome. I'm like, what happens if you get a COVID case? And they're like, I'm like, you have to shut down. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm like, so you might want to rebalance that. And then they were like, oh, I have to do that. I think I'm going to have to do that because that's it. Because the health department still comes in.
It'll work itself out in the way it should have worked itself in the first place, which is, people take care of your own thing, make your own decision, and do the deal.
So here's the human nature thing of this. And that goes back to that piece that I was sort of alluding to at the beginning. Sort of is that people aren't always honorable, and then that pushes the buttons of other people. So it's a very hard thing because this goes back to my stay in your own lane. Like if you're vaccinated and you've chosen to be vaccinated, do your thing. If you've chosen not to be, that's fine. But the honesty piece is what is the questionable pain. That's where the underlying piece of anxiety comes in, I think, for people, and being worried. The other aspect of that is, people, the New York Yankees, 9 people of them got COVID. Well,
it tested positive after vaccinations.
But so in science and theory, and this is only my clinical opinion, not based on other people's opinions about this, is that there's a difference between Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And not that there's a difference in like the fact that they're all mRNA, they're all like the same kind of stream, but Pfizer and Moderna, there's a reason why there's 2 shots. There's a reason why it's like doubled up. There's a reason, and there's a reason why it's 97 and 94%.
Yep. When
you get a shot, that's one shot that's had issues, and it's 64 or 67% or whatever the percentage has been up and down raging.
Right.
Well, there's more likelihood that you're going to have
64%, 9 players of 26-man team. Just about right.
Right. Well, so when you logic it out, you go right, and so. And you get, just because you got the shot, I mean, I imagine, in my mind, knowing sports teams and players, they got it and they ran out and ran amok and the masks came off and they did their thing and and now, so it's not like, the shots don't work. It's no.
So the Yankees are Johnson & Johnson?
Who?
The Yankees had the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. That was what was reported.
Why would you do that?
I don't.
That was a very poor decision.
I didn't make it. I did not make this decision. So unless the reporting was wrong, that was my educated guess after I heard that, this is what happened. I'm like, of course, 9 players got it. And like you just did the math and like, right. because it was
just about the percentages we expected.
right. So it's not that Johnson & Johnson doesn't work. It works, but if it's 64, whatever the percentage is, it's lower. So you're going to be more likely to catch it. Just you won't get it. You won't be hospitalized. Maybe you won't die like you would have before like that. But your range of statistics goes. Phew.
Yep.
So I'm very much encouraging people, if they can get the Pfizer or get Moderna, go towards that.
I'll make a confession here.
Yes.
My son's commencement is Friday.
I saw your
And
pictures.
at UVM, they are allowing 2 guests that are fully vaccinated, and the definition of fully vaccinated is both shots and 14 days.
Yes.
So 14 days after the last shot.
Here comes the confession.
So I'm not going to make that because I just had my second shot Saturday.
Oh,
So
you're going to be short.
Yeah, so my son goes, "What do you want to do?" I goes, "Well, get the ticket and we'll give it a shot." Ha ha.
Ha ha.
And so I got an email from UVM, and it was about the vaccination attestation. And I said, "Oh, I'm good. They're going on the honor system here," like that. And then I went through the whole process, and the whole process of applying for it. And at the end is, make sure you travel with your vaccination card to campus. And it's like, well, yeah, all right. So that's not going to work. But
Well, you can still travel with it.
I can still travel with it, but I'm not going to be able to get into the commencement.
Well, you might, because they might.
Yeah, we were speculating they're bluffing.
No, I would imagine that they're going to look at it. If they look at it, they're not going to do the math because there's so many people.
Yeah.
Just the reason why I'm saying that is because I just saw that happen.
Oh,
exactly the same thing. And there's people they were like 6 days short or 4 days short or whatever. And they were like, go ahead.
But they got to have the date in the head
Right.
about what the earliest date is. You would
Right.
think.
So.
And they're running like 8 commencements during the day,
Right.
different ones within about a half an hour
Right.
of each other.
Right.
But
so, and I'm certainly not saying, you should,
I understand.
blow it off, but I'm just saying, like,
It's just funny.
I think that, and I have heard, and, the CDC has been waxing and waning over the past week and a half, with their direction, but
Yeah.
the 2-week window has been moving around on that too.
Oh, has
for
it?
This. So, not a ton, but it's like, it's just go 2 weeks because it's just, that will make it fully boosted. But
Yeah.
there's other people that have said, well, it's, doctors you see like talk about it. They're actually epidemiologists and saying, well, you're really vaccinated within like 48 hours afterwards. And so it's just the window that you're, just to be safe kind of thing. So, but nonetheless, I would still bring it and say.
It's UVM, which has been militant about this.
Yes.
And I don't, I'm not saying that in a pejorative way.
No.
Because they did a good job.
They've done a really good job.
They got the kids through the year.
Right.
And without major incidents, and, they did the thing they were supposed to do. So I understand it. Just funny. I mean, you're going to have 95% of the people in that commencement are going to be fully vaccinated. And,
Right. Right.
I don't know.
Right. I know. We'll see.
Funny.
So
But this is the world we live in.
So this is why, it's important around the mental health awareness month. This is a huge, what a weird timing, perfect timing, odd timing, whatever it is.
The odd part about that was I was talking with his mother about it. And we were going over it. She goes, see if you can get the Johnson & Johnson shot. And that was the day that they paused it, the very same day.
See?
Yeah.
You weren't meant to get that.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yep.
I'm glad you didn't. Well, good luck with that. I hope.
It's fine. I'll watch it online. We'll go to dinner. Everything will be fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so Mental Health Awareness Month being that it is, so besides the not shot, mask, not mask,
Yeah.
right, issues, there's 2 big issues that have come up in terms of, what's going on in the country mental health wise this year. And that's really addressing the lack of addressing of children being impacted by this.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, it always comes up, addiction. So,
Yeah.
So addressing the children aspect first, and people talking about, the kids have been inside. People, I won't generalize it, but I will generalize it. There's so many parents and so many adults that think, kids are resilient, which they are, but
Yep.
kids don't have stress. Kids don't really care. Kids are just easygoing. Kids can sit in their room. Kids, right? Well, I have handfuls of kids in my practice that, the loneliness factor and the feeling of disconnect and the feeling of what we call parasuicidal behavior
Yep.
gestures. So it's not so suicidal behavior is obviously trying to kill yourself or
Right.
wanting to kill yourself, but there's a section of people in the world that have mental health issues at times where their anxiety and their depression is there, and it's an agitation of under the surface, but in order to relieve it, they act out in self-harming kind of ways. And one of those ways that I see having an increase this year is things like cutting. Kids will, take, little razors or
Yep.
bobby pins or safety pins or little knives or whatever and cut like little strips on their legs or their arms or
Yep.
whatever where you can't see. And it's not like they're deep cutting. They do like scratching, so it just bleeds a little
Yep.
bit. And so people are going to go, oh my God, that's terrible. Yes, it's not a good thing. But what it is kids, and adults do this too, not more kids do it than adults, but it's a sign of I need help versus I want to kill myself.
Right.
So when kids are adolescents mostly feeling lonely, rejected, socially disconnected, not feeling like they have anything going forward, because adolescence is the time when kids are really trying to figure out what's my purpose in life.
Right.
Is the world real? Who are these two people that I thought were great? And now I'm realizing that, oh my God, they're not the gods that I thought they were. Parents,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
They're going through all that anyway. And now they've been isolated for 16 months and, or whatever, and had Zoom calls, and some have been in school, but not a lot of social connection. And I have kids saying, I don't know how to be social anymore. I don't know what to say. I don't know what my friends look like. I don't have
Yeah.
all these things. And so, they're acting out. So I've seen an increase in the acting out on self-harm. So self-harm doesn't just come in that's the form of just the cutting, but that's one of the biggest ones, but also drinking, picking up drinking at earlier ages, having, parents have had more booze in the house and
Right.
other stuff. So they've been picking up, they don't notice, parents aren't, paying attention. They're at work. The kids like, oh, I took a beer, I took a Truly, I took a whatever and went outside or into the bedroom. I have clients that parents will tell me, yeah, I found a handle of vodka in my son's, closet. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Right. So and that's always been something that happens, but the increase of that over teenager or early adolescent tweeners coming up through and the social isolation is pretty significant. So more of the PSA to people that are listening, that if you have kids, certainly get them as activated as you can right away. I know a lot of schools have gone back in full. If you've chosen to keep your kid home, it's only a few more weeks left, try to get them to a summer camp, get them into something that's going to be more group related, get them back to being connected, because the social disconnect is huge on the mental health issues around anxiety and depression and low self-esteem and loss of contact with reality.
Yeah.
And I've told you stories before about, people who've really not come out of their house in a whole year, which blows my mind.
Right.
But there are people that are, have not left, or if they have left, it's just within the compound of their actual home.
And this was a group of adolescents who were struggling with this prior to COVID.
Right.
Right.
And then it's just compounded.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the isolating nature of social media,
Right.
just the diminished of social norms and behaviors
Right.
Was already a problem before COVID hit.
Right. And you see like a lot of depersonalization and dissociative behaviors, so the anxiety is dissociation from your body and your feelings. So you're always feeling like you're not part of yourself. So kids will report like, I don't feel like I'm me.
Yeah.
And parents are like, what does that mean? That's ridiculous. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, that's actually anxiety.
Yep.
It's not them being crazy. And, and I have parents be like, oh, they're just crazy. No, that's actually a feeling. That's a real thing.
Yep.
And even little kids. So I have a few little kids, who have not even started school yet. So they're school age, but they haven't actually gone into school. So their whole first school year experience has been on Zoom. And so I have a couple that have gone out and started like doing soccer and like pee-wee ball and like t-ball and stuff like that. And the behaviors, and I've got a couple coaches telling me that the behaviors of kids this year coming in has been atrocious because they have they don't know social norming. They have not.
Right.
So they're all running amok and screaming and no following rules and structures all over the place. So it's been quite interesting in the past couple
They
weeks.
think the world is their house. They can act in the world like they can in their house.
Right. Bouncing off, walls.
That they have the priority everywhere all the time.
Right. Because they've been either isolated away from everyone and ignored, or they've been doted on, and then it's all of a sudden there's 20 other kids. You're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
that's me. So yeah, so I think that downplaying kid stuff is not a good idea, and kids are resilient, but this is not the same as we've been dealing with before. This is something that we have a compounded issue for mental health issues, and I think if people don't watch their kids and their adolescents and self-esteem and sadness and feelings like that, and they downplay it, you're going to see a long roll, even with adults, right? Yep. You're going to see, because of this past year, you're going to see like a trend of upward movement on mental health issues from this set of generation coming up through because of the pandemic. And yeah, I think my colleagues would likely agree. And that, I'm just picking on this one set of people, like population age group, but it's for everybody, but particularly kids, because kids kind of get pushed over to the side, like, oh, they're fine.
All right. So what are some of the signs that require attention? Some of the things you should pay attention to.
Well, obviously, if you know your kid at his or her baseline of being like more social, more outgoing, and all those things, then certainly one of the high signs is isolating. Not you give them an offer to go out and do something. Like, no, that's okay. I'm going to stay in my room.
Yep.
You're starting to make plans. They're refusing. They're going out with you and being withdrawn. More resistant. Crying, tears, telling you they don't feel good, stomach aches, headaches increasing, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, anything that's away from what your typical kid would be baseline. And if your baseline kid
change of behavior. Change of behavior is always a key.
Right. And if your baseline kid was already at a struggle, then, if they're never coming down for dinner and they always used to, and now they're never coming down for dinner, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you have to probably get rid of the gaming units that have given them babysitting time, because the Xboxes and the Switches and all that stuff has been babysitting a lot. I was on school today for 20 minutes and then the rest of the day I was gaming. Yep. And so to go out in the world, I don't want to do that, and it's effort, and and people have gained weight, and there's lack of exercise, and now it's how it is. You get into a slump and you get into the sedentary spaces. It's so hard to undo it. So if it's whether it's weight, movement in brain, activity cognitively, just walking around, it's all going to be moved in the other direction. So, and if you as parents or you as adults aren't modeling that for your kids, then you're part of the problem, and bringing that to them because you're not showing them that this is what we do.
Plus, I think kids of that age, it's important to have expectations for them and quote-unquote responsibilities. For example, participate in a family, be there at dinner.
Right.
That type of thing. Go out with us, if we're going to go get a pizza or something, come along. So I think people who don't expect things of kids are setting them up for failure.
Absolutely.
I think expectations are important.
Well, yeah, and I think that people...
No, you can't stay in your room 24/7. Come on.
Right, and I think that some of the families that are having the hardest time now that I'm seeing are ones that used to require things and then kind of let it go over the year because it just became easier, and now to restart it, and restarting it as we go into summer.
Yeah.
Like the structure already is lacking as it is, because then school's out. They all go back into school last week or 2 weeks ago, and then, what is it, 3 more weeks, they're done.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's like, that's why I'm saying, like, summer camps, get them structured, have them do sport, sign them up. If they're of work age, get them a job, find something for them to do, so they're having to be up and out of the house and have a purpose, so that they're not just sitting around waiting for September to come to go back to school.
Yeah. I remember, I probably told this story before, but the best piece of advice I ever got for parenting was from the pediatrician. The first time we brought Sarah to the pediatrician, we're still young parents. We are petrified out of our minds, like to the point where, why are they letting us have this kid? And brought her to the pediatrician, and I asked the question. I said, listen, how do we know when to call you? When is it just something they're upset, deal with it, or when do I call the pediatrician? And she looked at me and she goes, trust your instincts. You probably know the right answer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing with parenting. And these, if your child is having issues or having struggles, trust your gut. You probably know. No one knows the kid better than you do.
Well, however, I have a side to that, is that you would think that, and I think that that's, for the most part, more often true than not. But I tend to see kids who the parents don't really know them very well. And so therefore, a lot of the conversations are about the fact that the child is so misunderstood or not understood or not even seen. And so it's not really, that's not a piece of, I have to bring it back to say to a parent, like, hey, here's what is going on and here's what needs to happen. And usually I get that response of, oh, I didn't realize that was going on. Or, oh, surprise. More like, oh, I never would have thought that, and they didn't tell me. And usually because there's not a relationship going on. I mean, many parents, obviously, like yourself with your kids, and many parents and kids have good relationships, or at least enough to have that. But when they come into my office oftentimes, and I think my colleagues would probably agree, is that there's relationship there, but there's something amiss, that the parent really doesn't know the kid as well as they think they do, or the kid won't tell them because there's either authoritarian parenting going on or really permissive parenting and not really a lot of involvement other than here. I had 10 years ago, I had a parent come in, sit down with their child, adolescent at the time, and looked at me and said, here's what I think happened. Here's what I think is going on. This person was in the hospital for the past 2 weeks. Here's what this person, my kid, told me had happened. I don't know what to do. You fix it. And I never saw the parent again.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I still have this now adult in my practice who's flourished, but the issue there was the parenting.
I couldn't detach like that. I mean, help me fix it, but I
mother
want to know what happened.
Oh yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And so in pursuit of trying to get the mother and father involved, it was like, oh no, we don't want to, no, will you just fix it?
Good Lord, wow.
And that's not unusual. That's not an only. I have multiples of, in ranging degrees of like hands off, like I don't want to deal with that, like I don't want to know, or it's just so ridiculous. They're just, it's all in their head, or very minimizing, very mental health issues don't exist. Or I have parents that don't like to have their kids come to therapy because the kids tell things on their parents, and that's one of the things is I have someone in my colleague's life right now that won't let their kid come to therapy because they don't want the child talking about them, which means the red flag.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not unusual. I mean, it's not the norm, but it's certainly out there a lot. And so
I believe it's not unusual that parents have that worry, but isn't it unusual that they would actually stop the kid from going to therapy because of that?
Well, you're going to have more people that are not going to do that, but certainly this is not unusual for. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. There's definitely parents out there that don't want, anything outside the house. What happens what happens in Vegas and stays there. And same thing in the house is they don't want the kid telling, because the likelihood, like in the case I'm thinking about right now, is if my colleague should be probably getting ready to call a DCF call, but not right there yet. But
yeah, wow.
So and it's not because there's abuse, but there's a lot of neglect, and and you can, just through stories, I'm like, oh, I don't know the kid. I don't know anything about that. I just know the story of like how this is happening, and like, oh man. And I've heard it time and again of like, oh yeah, the parent doesn't want anyone to know what's going on. Everything looks fine. They don't want but clearly the kid's telling everyone at school that something's wrong. Yeah. And the kids and the parent's like, nope, no therapy. They're going to talk bad about me. Well, maybe that's a cue for you.
Yeah.
That's a cue for you.
That shouldn't be your biggest worry.
Right. Exactly. Not about you, but about your child. So, which, often that's what leads to parents missing like the cues of kids being suicidal or being so dejected or feeling so lonely that this is what's going on.
Yeah.
So anxious. So I just think that kids have been so impacted by this past year in such a, they don't have jobs, so they didn't have something to go to every day like we did, and they don't have the outlets that adults create. And then if you're an adult, adults had issues as well, but I think kids get bypassed, and so you're going to hear probably more and more of that in the news in the next few months, because now assessments are happening more and more because kids have gone back to school, and the rise in child abuse had gone up because when the pandemic started and people got locked in, like alcohol and drug abuse went up, domestic violence went up, and child abuse went up, because now you've locked in your child with the abusers. The children have been locked in with their abusers instead of being able to go and have access to have people watching, which makes it drop in in numbers. Now it's risen. So
Yeah.
now they're going back to school, and you can see the numbers rising of like child abuse cases and people being reported and DCF being called because children are so distraught and
Yeah.
having to tell about their story of being home for the past year. It's very sad. So just making people aware during Mental Health Awareness Month that there's some pretty big stuff going on out there with kids and adolescents, and being mindful to, if you have them in your life, to watch out for.
And the extreme ends of this, I'm guessing there was kind of a fail-safe pre-COVID in school in that
Yes.
people were observing the kids
Right.
and picking up some of these signs and
right.
mandated reporting and things like that.
Right.
But without that oversight
Right.
and the house just being closed in,
Right.
a lot of this didn't come out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there were certainly, I mean, I know of cases that, on Zoom calls, teachers would see certain things and then they would call on things that were nothing. And then, because I certainly heard many of those
Yeah.
stories, kids sleeping, something's wrong, no one's home, that kind of stuff, or drinking. Someone had something. I remember a kid had something they were accused of drinking, and it was in a beer bottle. It was a root beer bottle, and so
Yep.
DCF got caught. So there's some good ones like that, but they were not those things. But yeah, the fail safe of, and it's certainly not perfect, but when you have kids in school and you have kids doing sports, and they're also being abused at home or neglected, or something's happening, you've got lots of adults who have hands on, eyes on, and
Yeah.
you're catching it more often.
Somewhat trained adults
Yeah.
or
Yes.
people who have some experience.
Some experience,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so this year has been really not so good for that. So, and then
And I know you do sports consulting a lot,
Yes.
and this has been such a big loss for kids.
Huge.
A lot of the answers for a lot of these problems is in team sports.
Yep.
And, we laugh about it and people roll their eyes, but learning life lessons
Oh.
and learning to deal with adversity and learning
Yes.
how to celebrate things, it's like sports is such a big part of that.
huge. And I think that when kids, haven't had it, and that's been hard for parents. I've had a few cases where parents have had a hard time getting their kids to go back because they're so demotivated now. It's like,
Yeah.
and they loved this, or they loved the soccer, they loved lacrosse or baseball or whatever. And the parents are like, what do you mean you don't want to go? And they're like,
Well, they're worn into sedentary.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is
Yeah.
it's just been like, well, I've been sitting in my room playing on the computer and watching TV, and even to say, go outside, just go sit in the sun, go run around the yard.
It's funny. It's kind of like enlightenment. If you've been around team sports your life, you participated, your kids participated, things like that. It's very easy to pick out people who have no contact with it, right? You just see, no, you don't understand the whole team thing at all.
No.
And kids that don't have that experience, there's just a whole difference in their context and outlook,
Right.
right?
Oh, totally.
It's harder for kids who haven't participated in team sports or, debate club or theater or anything like that. It
Right.
doesn't have to be
The
sports.
connected,
Some
right.
cooperative endeavor.
Right.
They have a hard time getting out of there. There's other things in the world besides me.
Right.
Those are
Right.
the kids that struggle with that.
Right. And you have that, as only children, I see that a lot with onlys,
Yep.
because if you have only you in the house and you've been not doing anything, and then you have
Yeah.
the motivation just is lost, It's just not there because there's no one else around you to model anything going on, to say, oh, this is exciting, let's go, and oh, my brother's doing it or my sister's doing it, or
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, the family, it's mom, dad, and me, or
Yeah, think of the lack of highs in this past year for families that have been more confined than I imagine they have been.
right, to have those self-actualized moments, those
Yeah.
successes or anything like that. It's just people just become complacent, and to no fault of their own because of the situation. So that's it about the kid thing, is that
Yep.
that's now moving on to adults, starting with the kid issue, but moving on to adults with the increase in people asking about opiates, and it kind of is the kid thing too, because you see a little bit of an increase in adolescents' use
Yep.
of it because they've been in the house and their parents have it, or they, someone has it because of an injury and it's an old prescription in the medicine chest,
Yep.
that whole thing. So, but also, now not little kids, but adolescents. So in their downtime, when they, I know a lot of adolescents in the area, did bonfires and stuff at night, and not be monitored all
Yep.
the time. And I have seen several clients that have been introduced to things that they shouldn't have been introduced to. So now there's an issue. And then and it's perpetuated, and it's got stuff in the house, and parents don't know, and and we're talking like 16, 17, 18, and then they're drinking on top of it. And so those numbers have now stacked into the increased, it's 30, I think the last number I saw on the increase of alcohol and drug abuse this year has gone up to 30 something percent.
Yeah.
It was 32%. I think it might be 36 now. And that's just reported.
Yeah.
And I'm going with the fact that it's got to be higher by leaps and bounds, because people don't report.
Well, the outlets to report them have been diminished. Access to the outlets to report have been diminished. So
exactly.
Yeah, you're right. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Right. So and you figure, so if we just think about AA and NA and all the A's that help with the anonymous groups that help, I know they're running statistics on things, and certainly they've been up and running on Zoom. I know there's a lot of places that never stopped doing in person.
Yeah.
So I know
but that was an adjustment for them.
Yes.
I mean, it's become helpful and effective, but it wasn't for a while. It took everyone a while to get used to running meetings this way and dealing with their recovery in this way, because isolation is the enemy to recovery.
To addiction.
Yeah.
Right, because addiction really needs to be connection. The opposite of being depressed and in addiction is to be connected. And so this is one of the the kiss of death kind of thing for people with recovery pursuits, because you need connection. One of the biggest things for people in recovery to be doing is connecting in with resources, call lists, groups,
sponsors,
activities, sponsors. So it's always getting connected, so you don't feel isolated and alone, which is the underside of a lot of addiction. All addiction has that underside of aloneness. So
you have to have access to connection all the time, whether it be some are doing multiple meetings a day or talking to their sponsor, or
or going. A lot of times they all go out. They, not being offensive there, but they as a group will go out for coffee, or they meet up and do an activity together.
Right.
Because they do men's group, women's group, they do the co-ed group, they do a step meeting, then they do like a traditions meeting, then they go practice. Like there's a lot of activity that goes on as a group of them together who are all going towards the same universal shared experience. And when that's taken away,
a team sport.
Right. Yeah, a team sport, right?
A shared universal experience and a sense of responsibility to something outside of yourself.
Right, because you have the accountability piece. So yes, and so therefore, when that's taken, that's why I put them together. The kids with the whole the concept is the same thing. Is that if you don't have that cohesiveness to feel like you're connected to something larger than yourself, then the spike goes up in the relapse and the slips and the behavior. And so and people, for some reason this past week I've been talking a lot with clients about, you don't have to actually pick up a drug or alcohol or gamble or have sex or do the thing that it is the ism that you do. You can be in relapse or you can be in slip mode if you're doing the behaviors that lead to it. And people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, you can be sober, which means you're clean from the substance of choice or the thing that you were doing to create the problem. But if you're still having the negative attitude and the bad thought process or the depressive thing or the, it's just the negativity around it or the toxicity, and then you act on that, the thought becomes the feeling, which becomes a behavior that's not nice, or you're lashing out, or you're angry, or you're agitated, or whatever it is, as an example. Well, you're the only thing that's not happening is you're not treating it yet with the substance.
That's why you need 12 steps.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's what the 12 steps are all about, treating the underlying behavior that led to the addiction. The addiction is usually a symptom more than the diagnosis, right?
So the use of the actual thing, whether it's, gambling, drugs, alcohol, sex, exercise, eating, cutting, right?
Yep.
Those are the symptoms of the problem. So the problem is then after you stop and you're sober or clean from the thing that you were doing, then that's when the work has to happen. Yep. If you don't do the work,
because you're staring at the void again, you have to fill the void.
You're staying sober, but you're not connected to anything that's going to really address the underlying reason that caused the symptoms to cause the problem. So people are always like, "Oh, I went to detox. I'm clean."
Yeah.
And now what?
Yep.
And they're like, "Oh, well, I'm going back to work," and but you've been doing this for like 15 years, and this is like your 7th trip around the sun, and what are you doing to fix that? Oh, I'm good now. I had to get it out of my system.
No.
And
Yeah.
so predictably, statistically, you're back in the cycle right there because, we call it 1, 2, 3 stepping in the step meetings, right? It's
Yep.
you admit you've got a problem. You go through the first 3 steps. Now, I think I said this last week, 4th and 5th step are where you have to really look at you and what has happened and your character flaws and your resentments and then all these things that have happened between you and other people. And people don't like to do that. So they 1, 2, 3 step, 1, 2, 3 step, 1, 2, 3 step.
Well, you have to go around the loop a couple times to learn the lesson because first time recovery, second time recovery rarely, if ever, work.
Right.
I mean, how many times have you heard someone stay in recovery from their first attempt?
It happens, but it's super rare.
Super rare. Yeah.
Very, very, very rare because
you're staring, the addiction is gone, you're staring at the thing that drove you to the addiction, and you have to have the skills to deal with that, or you're just going to be driven right back to the addiction, or another one.
Right. And if we look at addiction, like on the series of how many times someone relapses, right? And we never know because people all have to hit their own bottoms, whatever. But you just see someone first coming out of their addiction into recovery, say the first or second time. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think people make when they're doing that is they go back into the same environment. And the environment is the family.
Yep.
Usually it's still the people are with each other.
Yep.
And the person who's in addiction isn't in it alone. The family is involved as well. Families are part of the addiction. And this is one of the classes I teach. I teach about interpersonal connections with family and group dynamics. And you don't have to be a mom or a dad or a sister or brother using the substance, but in some way you're playing a part in the role of the addiction with the person, which is the underlying symptoms that are driving them to do that. That doesn't mean it's your fault. It means that you're just playing like the enabler role. You're giving money, you're giving a place to, you're making it easier, for instance, in a lot of ways. Or you're so worried that something bad will happen that you allow for the behavior that's not nice in the home until you bring right. So you have to, that doesn't mean you have to kick someone out, or you just have to be aware of that so you change your behavior that's not contributing to their piece of that. And that is one of the biggest parts of relapsing, is that people come right back into the same working environment that didn't change. They've tried to change, but then they come back in, and that's where the hurts and the damages and the sadnesses and the resentments are sitting a lot of the times, because that's where they festered, that's where they began, and then they go back and that's not resolved. And
not that this is the answer, and I don't advocate it as a universal solution, but when you listen to addicts go through their stories, you'd be surprised how often the key moment in their story is the point where the enabler reached the tough love stage.
Right.
And just say, no, you can't stay here anymore.
Right.
Or no, I'm not going to help you.
Right.
And obviously it's tough for the parent or the spouse or the sibling or whatever it is, whoever that person is. But that often seems to be a turning point for people.
Many, many times.
And again, that tough love and quote-unquote abandonment is not the silver bullet.
No.
But it's often a key part of it.
It's the boundary. So boundaries, talk about kids, right? Boundaries and structure for someone to understand that you can be here and I will help you, but I won't help you in this way.
Yep.
So the connection's super important, that you don't abandon ship on someone, right? But you abandon the behavior that you were doing to contribute to the problem.
Right.
So, and I walk this walk as well as tell other people, is that when you have someone in your life or people around you that are in addiction, that help them, but don't give, you'll buy them dinner, you won't give them money.
Right.
You'll take them to the grocery store, but you won't give them money.
Yeah.
Right. You'll give them a place to stay, but as soon as they're not, as soon as they fall off the wagon, then they have to find another place to stay immediately. So there's rules and ground rules, and if you don't stick by those, that's when it starts to fall apart. So you're helping along someone and containing them for them around good structure and boundaries for yourself, because you're not in their lane. You're just doing what's right for you, instead of trying to control by saying, oh, I have to give them $50 because if I don't, they might die tonight. Well, what if you give them $50 and they use it on heroin and they die? Now you're going to feel guilty that you gave them $50.
Right.
I always point that out. I'm like, I'd rather you not give them $50, and if they die, it's not on your hands and your mind, because it's never on your hands, but you're going to blame yourself one way or the other, and it's way easier to say they did it on their own than I gave them the $50 that they used.
Right.
So that's like, a very prime example of the contribution that the family makes into a person's addiction. And so if a person's coming out of detox and coming back into an environment, during the pandemic too, right? Which, because detoxes were full, they come back in, and now you're back in an isolated house with the same problems that haven't been worked on, which is the underlying problem of the reason.
Which wraps around back to the adolescence, where the parent says, you deal with this.
Right.
It's got to be a collaborative effort, because the fact that you get to this point was a team result.
Exactly.
It's got to be a team solution too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you get really good cases that, in terms of outcome, that they catch it early enough, and the family and the people or the spouse, they're on board and they get it, and and it gets together. But more often than not, it's a real training ground for people to really start understanding, because a lot of times by the time I see someone, and I'm not exaggerating, they're on their 30th admission on relapse.
Yeah.
And
not
they've
unusual.
blown themselves out of the water with their wife or husband has left them. They're broke. They were millionaires and they have nothing left. And and this is what happens. And now how do you rebuild that? And so, many times we can sort of piecemeal it back together with working in, but there's certainly many times that the bridges are burned and it's just, out.
Yeah.
So,
and what also makes that difficult is that addicts have a particular mindset that non-addicts don't. And so it makes it very tough for them to interact with each other, which is why the community of addicts, when you're in recovery, and your sponsors and your people go to the meeting with, and people that you've learned through recovery are extremely close, because they have a shared experience and they can speak each other's language. Doesn't mean the non-addict can't help.
Right.
But you have to understand that you're working on two different levels of thinking.
Well, right. So, and I think that's one of there's so many. That's like a whole show of how to help people who are in the helping spot, or the family or the spouse spot or the friend spot. That
well, the parents or the spouse go, I'll just love them through it. It's like it doesn't work that way. It
doesn't work like that. Yeah. Or people that unfortunately have that, like, they don't understand, like, how can someone think like that? If they love me, they wouldn't steal from me. If they love me, they wouldn't drink. If they
or it's a choice. The addiction is a choice.
Right.
They're making a choice.
The actual use, once a person's using, then every time they do use, it's a choice. But it's not a choice to be genetically prone to be an addict. But once you're in addiction, every time you pick up, that is a choice. It's then, how do you help a person make different choices? Because usually by the time someone's making those choices, they don't think. The addict mind, when it's in addiction actively, doesn't know how to make that decision, because it has no other decisions to make.
Right.
That's the one, because there is no other choice. And so for people that don't have the affliction...
But a non-addict will look at that choice and say, well, there's your family on this side and there's usage on the other, and the addict doesn't think that way.
Right.
It's just a completely different mindset.
People in active addiction don't think about the consequence of that, like a person who doesn't have the affliction of addiction. For me and you, right? Yep. I only know how the addict mind works because I've been working with people with addiction for years, and so I get it. And sometimes I have moments where I'm like, I have to really loop it around in my head, going, okay, and then because I have to be like, oh, why did they do that? And then, oh, I know why they did that. But if you're just going with like your own mindset without the clinical thought process, it's like, this doesn't make any sense because it's so foreign. It's like so counter to what you would think.
Right.
But for a person who's actively in addiction, it makes all the sense in the world. And then when they're not in addiction, I always point that out to family members or friends or whoever it is, or parents. I say, remember Bob when he was not. Remember Susie when she was not using. Would she do that? And they're like, no. I'm like, right. When the substance or whenever the thing is that is holding their head hostage because it's so powerful, when it's holding them, they don't think like that. Yeah. They think like this. And so when I give those metaphors, it often helps the situation. So if all my listeners out there can think of like that that people who are in addiction don't think like their wise mind. They think in their addiction mind. Sure. So their wise mind is when they're not addicted, and their non-wise mind is when they are. And so you can't make sense out of it. So I have the phrase with a lot of families, I say, you can't talk to drunk, you can't talk to crazy, and when you're drunk and crazy at the same time, forget it.
Right? Yeah.
So, and that's what a lot of people do. Someone comes home and they're high or they're drunk or whatever, and you're like, I can't believe it. How can you do this? And the person has no idea you're speaking to them.
Yep.
And people have to learn that oftentimes the hard way of like, you can beat your head against the wall over and over and and then the person sobers up and the next day, I'm so sorry and all this stuff. And then you realize, wait a second, they're not in the addiction, in the moment of the substance, they're now coming into their wise mind until they go back into it. So and it's a learning process, and it's very frustrating, and it taps a lot of people out, and so that's why it's so important for people to stay in their own lane, who are not in the addiction, but to make sure that they take care of themselves.
Yep.
Because if they don't take care of themselves, they get pulled in, and it becomes the crazy shows that we've all known.
And
in some way.
It becomes a contribution to the addiction.
Right.
When you don't establish boundaries, it becomes a contribution to the addiction.
Right. And and establish and hold them. And that's where I see a lot of fall down for people that are trying to help, is that they'll establish a boundary and then not follow through, like kids, right?
Yeah.
If you put in a consequence, and if you do this one more time, and then they do it one more time, and
nothing.
Yeah. And so so they learn how to blow past your boundaries, and then you go, it's easier just to not deal, but it's really not. It causes you greater stress than the stress that would be created if you held the boundary in the first place. But it's like anything. You don't know it until you actually can really do it, and it's scary to do it. It's an unknown. It's a threat generator of like, what if I do that and they leave?
Well, it's a similar issue in that you have a hard time as an adult parent trying to get into the mindset of the kid and what would be effective for them. And a lot of times you see parents who are trying to curb a behavior, and what they're doing is actually training the child that behavior is going to get a positive response.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so so combining it with like the pandemic issue and the rise this year is the complicitness and the complacency that's happened in homes.
Yeah.
Because the tolerance,
parents have given up too. Given up is probably wrong,
it's
but
it's just it's like it's easier just like I'll deal with this later.
Yeah,
well,
I'm dealing with so much. I'm not going to deal with
this right now.
Yeah.
Right, and it's and unfortunately, that problem lands in the hospitals or my consults or in detox, because the increase in the amount of people seeking help now for recovery is huge. I mean, look at the TV ads. I mean, I don't know what it is like across the country, but I know here in Massachusetts, or when I've traveled to Florida, I mean, Florida is a mecca of recovery programs, and some great ones. And I tend to send people out west more often because there's a couple really great programs out there.
That's the change of location strategy. A lot of times, you talk about getting out of the environment,
right,
to help get on the addiction recovery, but unfortunately you go through the program in Florida and you come back home into the same situation.
So that's what I was just going to say. So it's geography doesn't fix the problem. What it does is it changes the latitude, which changes the attitude, right? And if you can get out of the attitude and change that latitude, when you come back, you're more likely going to have it set up. If you do come back, a lot of times clients like that I send end up not coming back. They stay and then they get a job. Like they realize that the environment is not good for them to come back to if it hasn't changed. But many of the programs are super good now in terms of working with either spousal families or parenting families, or or something that if they haven't blown up the family at that point, that there's usually really good family work that happens that they can introduce and get it going, and then provide the service coming back, so that people can return home. And then some people don't, which is fine. I mean, because the statistics for people in recovery, I mean, I used to work and do groups all the time, and I'd sit with like veterans a lot, and I'd look around the room, and you know me, I'm very blunt clinically because I don't want to ever sugarcoat like the reality of something, and I would say, look around the room, for every 100 of you, there'll only be one that will remain in recovery for 1 full year before you relapse.
Yeah.
And they would
the
look of like, how can you say that? That's so negative. No, it's like, it's negative, but it's positive in the fact that, do you want to be the one? Who wants to be the one? And I want you to be the one, and I want you to have 5 of you be, right? So it's because people don't wrap their head around the fact that it's a big deal for them to be in recovery, that they're more likely to be back in relapse.
Right. If
they don't make these changes to hold the recovery together, because if it's not just as simple as going to a meeting and going to work and then having a sponsor. You have to actually look at why, how, and when you got to the point you are at. I have countless stories of people who I still have at least one client over the years. He refuses to look at the things. He's an addict because he's an addict, and all the things, even though I pointed out like 10 things that have contributed to the reason why he is, nope. But he still comes. So I know he knows, but he just doesn't want to. So I do the work
But that's,
I talk about it when he
yeah.
comes, but he's just like,
But
I don't
that's
know.
accepting responsibility,
Right.
which is one of the keys here, because
Right.
addiction
Doesn't happen to
doesn't
you.
happen to you.
Right.
I was going to say that, but I wasn't sure of it. But yeah, addiction
Yeah.
doesn't happen to you.
Right. Right.
It's a
Addiction.
culmination of circumstances.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I
so
mean,
you have,
culmination of your decisions and your
well,
circumstances.
it's a culmination of a lot of different things. I
Yep.
mean, you're usually genetically loaded. There's,
Yep.
obviously, right? There's a line, and then what happens is it either activates or it doesn't activate. That's why we've done great twin studies to see if you're raised in a house of alcoholics versus not. And I mean,
Really?
right?
Yeah.
But it's an accumulation of socialized, environmental, nurtured in or nurtured out, or exposure rates to social groups, friends, family, coaches, pediatrician. Like it's a tribe effort that somewhere it starts to go off the rails somewhere.
Yep.
And for most people, it's some emotional traumatic event, and it doesn't have to be a death. It's not like over the top. It could be an accumulation of a parent constantly shaming and blaming and putting a child down to never make them feel good enough. The underside of addiction is shame. People are feeling ashamed of themselves, not good enough.
Chronic self-image
Chronic
issues,
low self-image, yeah,
which
so-
lead to chronic social issues.
Right.
Which,
And so the withdrawal, and it starts young. It's usually, you start being in addiction between 0 and 6 years old, essentially. It sets you up then
Really?
for what's going to come later. And then how it gets activated is your exposure and environment, what you're nurtured about. Are you given positive reinforcement? Are you given unconditional love or not?
Yep.
And it's just a matter, and then it builds into the kid's resiliency and who, because you can have some kids that are in, alcoholic families, and grow up and become adult children of alcoholics, but never become alcoholics or drug addicts themselves. And for a variety of reasons, because they had protective factors that their parent didn't have. And they grow up and this is the norm. I mean, there's some great books out there if people want to. There's Children of the Self-Absorbed, growing up as an addict, an adult child of an alcoholic home. That's a great book. Melody Beattie's Codependent No More.
Yeah.
Codependency is a huge piece of addiction, and usually people who have addiction, I always, my class always challenges me whenever we have this big debate every semester about, like, I love the debate too, because it gets people thinking about, like, is there ever a time that there's not codependency somewhere? No.
Yep.
Because you're codependent. You build, I need you to need me to need you. That's my phrase. It's like, I need you to need me to need you. Whether you're talking about a pill bottle, a bottle, sex addict, gambling. I need the thing. I need it to need me to need it.
Yep.
So, the codependency is there, and it's a relationship, or it could be the thing. So
I'm guessing modeling transference has a lot to do with that. Now, I remember a key point, because my family life wasn't Dick Van Dyke, that's for sure. But early I ran into a good friend, and his family life was great. His parents and that environment in that house, that became, this is the way it's done. This is the way I want to be. This is the house I'd like to be in. So that was modeling a different way of approaching things.
Right.
Just parenting, being part of a unit, and going that way.
Right.
Whether you find it in a coach, whether you find it in a teacher, whether you find it in your best friend's parents, or you find a different role model, essentially.
Right, and if you have a resilient protective factor like a role model that actually gets your match, and that's usually what when people report to me about, like, what has kept them away from doing those things, it's more often than not that someone in their life has been the protective factor in some way that they.
Well, that's the model in addiction recovery, isn't it? It's basically finding someone else to model.
Yes.
Because
that's the connection to that person, right?
Someone who has the same context you have, but are dealing with things a different way.
Right, because the stories are so similar. If you sit around an AA room, and you listen to the stories, which I encourage people to do, because it's like life. Yeah. Everyone has a similar story. It may have been on East Street versus 12th Street, but the stories are the same. Or it could be in Dorchester, Massachusetts versus Winchester, Massachusetts. It doesn't matter, because the stories are going to be very similar as to what happened to make the person sitting in the room be sitting in the room.
Right. But
So-
you're looking at that person who has the same story you have, different names and places, but the same story.
Right.
But they're here.
Right.
And you go, oh, I can get here.
Right.
You know, what's he
exactly.
doing? What is she doing?
Right.
How do I get there too?
Right. And that's the
Yeah.
benefit of having that universal shared experience and the cohesiveness of team sport is
Yep.
so that you feel the camaraderie that I'm not alone, which brings it back around to the pandemic. I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And this has been isolating. So that's why it's like encouraging people get out there. Groups are there. They've been going on and to be able to get a handle on this, because now that things are opening up more in the past week, especially, that's why I said a panic. There's been such a flurry of calls to my office of, people thinking,
Really?
nobody was
Yeah.
open for, like, I think
Yeah.
there was a mindset that people thought that things were closed. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I have a 6-month wait list, so
Yeah.
there's not closed. And so people are surprised. I got a message this morning from someone saying, oh my gosh, because my message machine says, if you'd like to be a client, you certainly can, but there's a wait list.
Wow.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, can you put me on the wait list? And I'll call back and say, well, it's 4 months or it's 6 months. They're like, I'm willing to wait, because everybody's saying that. So it's, so if you can't get into individual work, there's plenty of group activities going on. There's plenty of stuff being started up. People are going back to doing meetup groups. I know you can just see the flurry all over social media right now going, hey, next week when everything opens up, we're getting together. We're going to do a softball. I mean, so it's starting. It's out there. Get out there, do it.
But it's a good opportunity if you haven't done these types of groups and things, because usually you think of it as a clique and you don't want to break into an already established society, but everyone's reestablishing now.
Right.
So it's an open
that's
door.
I think that's one of the best things, and it's been working with kids too, because kids are like, oh my God, I'm going back to school and it's a new class and nobody knows me, and I'm like, you're all doing the same thing.
Yep.
You're all coming, for once, you're all going to be going together at the same time. You're all feeling the same way. Nobody's been
Right.
there to have all these 75 friends. You're all doing it at the same exact time, so you're all coming in on equal footing for the most part.
Yep.
I mean, obviously there's...
And they don't know what you did in 4th grade, so they're not going to make fun of you for it.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
they haven't been following you for the past year, and
Yeah.
they don't care,
Yeah.
because everyone's worried about themselves, because everyone's feeling the same thing. So
Fresh start.
exactly. So anyway, Mental Health Awareness Month is really important to be doing that for the whole year, and just being conscientious of the fact that people are struggling, and that when somebody flips you off and tries to run you off the road,
Well-
remember, they might be having their own issue that day.
Yeah, that's old school Massachusetts. We can deal with that.
So anyway, you guys, it's the clock on the wall says it's time to go. So you guys have a great week. Enjoy your weather if you have good weather, and have good mental health.